Longo. So the first item is leadership priorities. Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So this is kind of late coming because we didn't have any meetings. It actually evolved from one of the Council of Great City Schools school board member conversations, and they talked about how, I don't remember which district, talked about how important it was in this time of crisis for the district leadership, meaning board and administrative leadership, to come together with their top priorities. I still think that, well, now that we're able to take a deep breath, that maybe we do that. And it might help us as we go into these difficult budgetary times, like what are the most important things that we need to focus on now, right? And so I would suggest that maybe we ask the superintendent to bring that back to us for discussion at a later date.
Mr. Superintendent.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's already on our agenda on our agenda to bring to the board at some point. So yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Dr. Robinson, Superintendent's emergency authority updates.
Okay, so this, again, I put these out early. And so there's an April 17th memo from our general counsel that has a lot of backup and charts, and I appreciate that because I love my charts. My request is that for this spreadsheet that lists all of the actions taken under the emergency authority be provided to the board electronically, and that with where we can double click and see the details. So, for example, the school food service worker wage bonus. That's great. I remember discussing it with Dr. Fenoy. I think it's appropriate, but I never got details, right? And so I would just like for it to be shared with us electronically with the details embedded in the document.
Not a problem. Mr. Tierney and his team already have all of that, so we'll be glad to share that with the board electronically.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson, PD3.
Oh, goodness. And so I think this was, I was having a brain flash. So again, we're in a crisis. So, I view this, some of the people have heard me say this 25 times. I think the house is on fire right now. We're going to go through a phase where we're looking at what I call the smoldering embers of the house that burned down. And then there's a rebuilding phase. And I think it's part when the superintendent brings us his priorities and we have that discussion, that can also help lead us into our priorities for rebuilding how we deliver education. So it's my request that we have some thought, maybe led by one of the superintendent's work groups, around how we reimagine education so for the rebuilding phase. So let me give you an example. This I think says it most clearly. There are some preschools that are only open at night because they are there to deliver services and care for children whose parents work at night. Right now, I'm not saying we should have schools that are open at night, but should we? I don't know. But the point is that we have to look as we rebuild. This is our opportunity to really get it right, to take all that input that we've gotten over the years from parents and students on what it should be, the things that we know about, that we've read about, and then rebuild this. And so it's my request that the board support my concept of the superintendent having a work group that just looks at how we rebuild, and creatively from the needs of the students, the families, and the educators, the district staff. Because right now we're just putting out fires. Somebody has to remove themselves from putting out the fire and think about how we rebuild.
I see you shaking your head. Yes, Mr. Superintendent. Do you want more board authority on this one, or are you okay with this?
No. I thought she asked the board a question. I didn't. On my side, Dr. Mr. Oswald and his team are there, and Dr. Robinson and I have talked about this, and I think the most salient point is the reality of those of us putting out the fire, but having people who can solely focus on this. And so I've been talking to the team over the last 3 weeks, literally looking at all the talent in the district. And there are some great work groups now that are working on things that we actually probably won't need right now. And I can refocus their efforts on some very specific things. So Mr. Oswald and I have a one-on-one later on this week, and we will absolutely bring something to the board back. I think it's going to be interesting times. I think there's the reality of getting to August or whatever that date is, and then how we keep building. I don't think we're building for an end date. I think it's going to be an evolution as we try things. Things are going to work, things are not, and we're going to have to adjust. And so, Mr. Oswald, he and I have already talked about this, but we will bring you back more details. And I think we also need to figure out the community piece to this as well. And I think, and haven't yet figured that part out, but I think that has to be a integral part of the rebuilding process.
Thank you. Mrs. Andrews, BD4.
Yes, the superintendent's, the revisiting of the superintendent's emergency powers. When we started this, it was interesting. I did ask the general counsel to check the urban districts, the 7 urban districts, and she said she couldn't get a lot of information, but I did my own tracking, and most of those districts were working really hard because it's been very difficult for everyone. They were working really hard on remote school board meetings, public access for communications, and I truly appreciate all the work that has been done by the superintendent on the time when we really could not meet, but we are truly meeting now. I've been sitting on the Council of Great City Schools conference calls every Friday. I invite you all to sit on them too. And it does put us up in the realm of doing good work. But I've been working with a lot of folks and learning from a lot of other school board members. So when I look at this policy and I look at the superintendent's powers as the general counsel said to us, he has a lot of work to do, but we as a school board need to discuss what we need to be doing right now. When we put these in place at the beginning, we really didn't know which way we were going. We do know now that we have a tracking mechanism to get things done. So I think we need to revisit this. I don't think we need 90 days. That's just my opinion for all the things that we need to talk about. Since we're now virtually, we can call emergency meetings if needed, because we're going to have to talk issues. We're going to have to talk about a lot of things as it relates to the academic success of our children and put policies together. So now when I look at this and it says that the superintendent truly will be doing all these things, I don't think he needs to be doing it in isolation. Now that we're together, we have to pick up ourselves now and get busy and do the work that we have to do. As I sit on those conference calls as your representative to the Council of Great City Schools, as well as your representative of the Florida School Boards Association, they're getting a lot of stuff done. We've been kind of sitting a little bit because we just had our first meeting last week as a workshop, and today is our official meeting. We have to get busy. All these questions that I hear board members talking about from everywhere else, they're asking me, are we doing that? Are we having those discussions? And it talks about educational services, contracts, all those pieces that board members are doing. We haven't been doing it. I don't want to leave it all to the superintendent. I'm elected as a school board member, and I want to get busy and get back to work to doing the things that need to be doing. So when I look at this emergency powers piece for 90 days, I don't think we need that. I think the superintendent has so much to do anyway in his power structure based on what I got from Mrs. Rico, our general counsel. And we have to step up now to do the things that we need to be doing. So I just really wanted you all to discuss that with me to see if you felt that way, because it's no reflection on him, but it's about us and getting our jobs done.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. I think Mrs. Andrews makes a very good point. I know when this whole crisis came up, I actually worked, they might not realize it, I worked very hard to not talk to district staff too much so that they could do their work. But I do think that now, like I said, in my opinion, it's time that we could take a deep breath. And so it's time for us to step back into our role as school board members and again, work officially as a team in public, right? I know we've been talking to the superintendent and other staff about various things, but I agree with Mrs. Andrews. It's our meeting now. We're working the bugs out of this virtual thing. And so I agree. I think that we can move forward and step back into our role in working with the superintendent publicly to get these things done.
Ms. Brill, did you hear me?
No, I didn't hear you. Thank you. So my concern right now is just looking at what's ahead and how nimble we have to be and whether meetings can be called that quickly. Because right now we're heading into hurricane season. So on top of COVID-19, we're going to be dealing with that layer. And so I have a level of comfort in feeling that we have this policy in place. I do feel we've been informed about everything. I don't feel that we've been sitting back and not doing our jobs. I know I've had more conversations with Dr. Fenoy recently than I think I've had all along. I mean, we have great conversations. So, I can go with what the majority feels is appropriate, but I just would like us to be able to be as nimble as we have to be with whatever might arise. And I feel we are being very well informed as it is right now. And I don't feel that I've abdicated any responsibility.
Go ahead, Ms. Rico, then Ms. Whitfield.
Thank you. Just as a point of information, just a couple of things with respect to the policy and its usefulness at the beginning of this crisis. I just want to offer that this policy was done in a thoughtful, research-based manner. There are other districts that did adopt this. There were other districts that had in place other emergency policies that created a broad base of emergency power for their superintendent. So this wasn't really done in any kind of a vacuum or in a way to be reckless with power. It did, however, provide, and I think will continue to provide, for a transparent, well-reasoned roadmap for the board to lead through its superintendent and navigate very nimbly in a legally compliant way. Remember, if any deviation to policy occurs during this period of time, even between board meetings, you have an unauthorized action. And so this provides for the superintendent to implement various reactions for the ever-evolving rules, laws, edicts, situations that have faced the district in addressing these, as everyone has said, over and over again, unprecedented situations. So secondly, I do want to just remind the board that, as a point of information, it sunsets, I believe, June 16th, naturally. And then, if there is guidance requested in terms of, how to early terminate it, I'll be happy to provide guidance with that as well.
Ms. Whitfield, then Mr. Shaw, then Mrs. Andrews. Ms. Whitfield first.
I just wanted to ask Dr. Fenoy, what is it that you still need this policy for? Do you feel that it's still useful? Is it something that has really facilitated business and needs to continue?
So it's interesting. I mean, what we didn't realize at the beginning is how much had to get done. And so so let me be really clear. The emergency powers are used as sparingly as possible, and they're only used after we inform the board of what's happening. What it allows us to do is to make a decision as a team, what ultimately I'm responsible for, and not have to wait for a board meeting or all of those processes. When it first happened, I told Julianne and her team, I don't want to do anything that isn't reviewed by legal and documented thoroughly so that the board and then potential audits moving forward. I think to someone's point, my biggest fear right now is hurricane season and all of the things that are going to happen this summer, because we actually don't know what school is going to look like in the fall. And so I think, I definitely don't want to be on June 30th if everything's in order. But right now, it's not something that I actually think about that often. What happens is we find a problem on the horizon, we come up with a solution, and then we determine in our committee, we're going to use emergency powers, or does that need to, since we were able to prop up the board meetings, I can say that can go on just a regular board meeting, it can wait. There's some construction things that could not wait, as vendors were coming forward, augments the contract. So it just depends. So we don't really have a list of, I want to use the emergency powers for this. It's literally, hey, this vendor is saying that they would like to do all of their summer work now. Can we approve that? Well, yes, we can approve that now on emergency powers, which allows us to probably get a better pricing. Or we wait until a board meeting and we lose time. So it doesn't really matter to me. I just know as for the system, it's allowed us to not have to wait for things that are necessary. And then it actually has forced us as a team to think very carefully how we make that decision and ultimately how we communicate with you guys.
Mr. Shaw, then Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. I think I understand some of what was said. My concern is that, Dr. Fenoy has been extremely efficient, has gotten things done, and he hasn't violated or got in a position where he challenged any of the policies that the board has. He's been consistent in responding to our needs. And we got to realize our role is to make the policy, and his role is to be the operational administrator of the school district. And to make any changes at this point in this policy, I think is doing a disservice to the public and this community, because we're not out of this crisis yet. And for us to second guess or even give the appearance that we're second guessing because we want to be involved in ways that we shouldn't, I think is wrong. So I'm not interested in making any changes at this point. I think Dr. Robinson's point that we've got to have these conversations because we've got major decisions, but I'm not sure that revisiting a policy that's now being used around the state. And if any of you have been listening to any of the FSBA conferences, they've been very clear about school boards staying in their lane and not getting into the administration of the district. And I feel really strongly about this one, that this is not the direction that this board should go. And I think we're doing a disservice to the community if we start interfering with the role of the superintendent.
Mrs. Andrews, then Ms. McQuinn, then Mr. Burrell. Go ahead, Mr. Andrews.
Yes, I want to be clear that this is nothing to do with trying to take over the role of the superintendent. It's about more discussion for us. I've been on the conference calls for the past 6 weeks with the council and other groups. The kinds of things that we're talking about are the things that I think we should be talking about. These are policy things that will come up in the future. So it's not anything to say a personal against any school board member sitting here right now. It's about more time for us to begin to hash out the kinds of things that we need to be talking about as the policymakers representing the constituents of Palm Beach County. So it has nothing to do, in a sense, with taking anything from the superintendent. It's about doing my role as a school board member, working with the 6 of you to make sure that our thought processes are in place to get the work done.
Mrs. McQuinn.
So I totally, Mr. Shaw said it better than I ever could. So ditto to that. The one thing that I asked Dr. Fenoy in the beginning, and I know they're tracking and keeping a list, was to make sure that as a board, we know what emergency powers he has used, the situations that he's used that would typically, well, no, not typically, that would have come to the board. So there aren't many of them. And I know for myself, we're either getting a call from Mrs. Paul or Mr. Tierney or Mr. Oswald. I'm trying to think of them all, Dr. LaCava. And those are just questions that we might have. But I think the instances where something would have come to us for a vote that didn't, we have been well informed about. The other thing, though, that I do want to agree with Mrs. Andrews, but I think that it's going to happen now. It may be, and I've said this before, all of this distance learning stuff. As a board, when we want to have good discussions, we may have to meet more often. And that's so we can do our job. And if, we may be going sooner than we think back in person. But I do know Dr. Fennoy welcomes, sometimes to his staff's consternation, but he welcomes our discussion to know what we're thinking as a board. Thank you.
Ms. Brill.
Thank you. So I also want to agree with what Mr. Shaw said. I don't want to see a change to the policy. I will tell you that I don't think a day goes by, a working day from Monday to Friday goes by, that I don't hear from someone on the superintendent's staff about things that are being dealt with. So I have felt very proud of what's been going on. Dr. Fennoy participated in a COBRA meeting recently. The public has been commending what they're seeing. But to Mrs. Andrews' point, as you see things, Mrs. Andrews, and on the meetings that you're attending where you hear certain things that we should be discussing, I would hope that you would bring those back to us. And if we need to build some flexibility into the discussion items when we can have them, let's do that. But I do feel very comfortable with the way the policy is right now.
I know, Mr. Shaw, you had your hand up. I just want to ask the superintendent. Dr. Fennoy, you and I have had discussions about, now that we have this working pretty well, this virtual meeting stuff working pretty well, that you intend to have, I know our next meeting is, at this point, is scheduled for May 20th, but you've had some discussions about possibly having some meetings in between now and May 20th. So I understand this. I think we're unfairly characterizing what Mrs. Andrews said. I don't think that she's suggesting that we should be making decisions for the superintendent that he would make without board approval anyway. What she is suggesting is that she would like to have those items that he is doing that we would normally approve, that those things are what she's concerned about. So, I think some of you misread what she's saying. For us to be micromanaging the district or taking over the administration's responsibilities, I'm sure that's not what she meant. From what I heard from her to say, it's basically that if he's going to use his emergency authority, but we have an opportunity to have meetings, then why does he need to use emergency authority if we're going to have a meeting next week? And I've had discussions almost every single day with the superintendent and staff too. So I know that he's only used the emergency authority very infrequently. There's probably no more than 3 or 4 times I would imagine that he's actually used that. So I'm not so sure, Mrs. Andrews, at this point that we actually need to pull back on the policy, especially if the superintendent's going to be setting up meetings between, more or less weekly where we can discuss these items, and the things that he would typically have to use emergency authority for, he won't have to do that because we can meet now virtually. So, okay, I think Mr. Shaw, you were next. Go ahead, Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. And I think Mr. Barbieri, you touched on, I think, where I was going on some of this. This whole thing is moving so rapidly that just the direction and advice that comes from Tallahassee on almost a daily basis, things that happen within the county, are going to help drive where we are. And I think all of us are probably on the same page of that concern about where we go for the future. And I hope that what we do is that we allow Dr. Fennoy to be the leader on this. And when issues start coming up, if it's the issue of distance learning, we've been hearing from all over the country that the issue of students trying to get through this, the distance learning of being on devices has been difficult for students. And that's something, but I don't want us to get ahead of the kinds of planning things that he needs to do, because he's in contact with other superintendents and leaders throughout the state that are managing this issue. And as long as we can keep our focus away from interfering with that management of these issues, I think we're okay. So that's what my reservation is.
Mrs. Rico.
Thank you. And just by way of example, I think it's important to note that this is a hand in glove process so that, for instance, the board just approved several emergency policies, right, that deviated from our ordinary policy provisions on student learning, on personnel matters. And while those processes were implemented before the board voted on them, and they were implemented to some degree under the superintendent's emergency authority, that filled that gap to get to this point. Now, could we thread the needle? We have given you a crosswalk on other superintendents' authority and power that already exist in statute or other policy to get some of this done, probably. But this gives a runway to allow for the board's business to continue, particularly on the continuous operations, the policy that you just began in development for actually a permanent policy for health pandemics. And so that was really critical. Are there going to be more instances like that where we would need that hand in glove opportunity to implement because of reactivity to something that's going to face us in the next, I don't know what, until this pandemic is over? I don't know, but that's why we were doing this, because we don't know, and things have popped up in a surprising way. So the policies are being brought forward for the board to approve. No question about it.
Mrs. Sanders.
Yeah, Mr. Barbieri, I want to thank you because I think you got it just right. But I think this discussion is good for all of us because we're all in different places. I'm on different conference calls with the community as well as different school districts and organizations. I represent you. So as a result, it's my responsibility to make sure I share with you what I know and the things that I think that we can do better. We are moving. We're right on task for what we need to be doing. But as a board, I would like to have more conversations with you all as we move forward. And I think now that we're up virtually, we're going to have that.
Mrs. Whitfield.
I just wanted to say to the superintendent, I love the idea of where Mrs. Andrews is going with the idea that we would get a chance to participate more. I'm thrilled that we've been able to have this meeting and the meeting last week. I think that's great. Maybe let's just not remove the policy as it stands right now so we don't tie his hands in case there is a crisis that comes up in these next few weeks. But I think if we could ask the superintendent just wherever possible, we would like to do our job because for me, this is great. I love feeling like we're involved in the system again and having a chance to have an impact on it because that is what we would like to do in this job.
Let me say this. I think if I were to advocate for the district, I think it's most important to leave the policy in place and let it run to sunset because we don't know what we don't know right now. But I will definitely commit to having more meetings because even in those emergency actions, as Julianne stated, sometimes I'm forced to react to it and then bring it to the board for essentially ratification, for a better lack of words. But when I say we're so meticulous about even using them, and typically we've only used them because something has surprised us. We haven't been able to put it out for the board to review. It's kind of come our way and we have to make an instant decision. So I fully appreciate all the support and the acknowledgement that we haven't abused anything at all. And I do commit to, obviously it was 6 weeks ago when I said we need to figure out a way to bring the board back into the business. And I know for some people it didn't happen fast enough, but part of my role is to make sure that y'all look good. So I had to make sure that we could do it correctly first. And so I think for me, knowing what I know now, because at the time when Julie and I talked about it, I didn't understand the reason why. Well, I get it now. And so I would probably ask, we just let it sunset and then I'll just commit. And you, obviously, I do talk to you regularly. Then I will make sure that I will commit to adding more meetings as necessary and doing everything I can to keep you informed and working because let's be very clear. I need you to get through what's about to happen over the next 3 years. So that's all I have to say to it.
Dr. Robbins.
Okay. All right. There we go. Thank you. So let me be clear. I just want to get back to the business of the board, right? And And when I look at this chart that was provided to me, I really don't remember having conversations with anyone, superintendent, or anybody in administration about some of these things. But I also have some level of trust where it's like I don't need you to tell me like every little thing before you like make a move. And I think that the spreadsheet that I talked about with the ability to double click and get the details would satisfy my need. But I really want to support the concept of us meeting more often, because we really need to do some long range planning, not only in terms of all the budgetary crisis, but really seriously how we rebuild this thing called the Palm Beach County School District, because it's been upended. And I hope we put it back together in a much better way. And it's going to require a lot of board conversation in order to do that. I think that, some of this conversation today is part of that, but I really would support us meeting more often, because we have to get it right. We have one chance to rebuild this thing.
All right, if there's no further discussion on this one, we'll move on to BD5, Ms. Brill.
Thank you. So going back quite a while ago, I'm sure some of you remember that the supervisor of elections used to go into the schools and help register students to vote. And then it transitioned to the League of Women Voters. They've been going in the recent years. I received a phone call from someone at the League of Women Voters regarding, because the schools have been closed, they haven't been able to continue the voter registration drive. And this is a two-pronged conversation. They asked if it would be possible, if we're going to be mailing out diplomas to our graduates, could we include something with their diploma? So that was part A, which I didn't feel that I could just ask that of the superintendent without involving all of you. And then the second part of it would be, if we're going to do that, my first instinct was, okay, we get from the supervisor of elections, they have plenty of voter registration forms. We pop it in there. There's no extra postage. But then we started talking about how young people today, they don't fill those things out and send them in. They tend to do stuff online. So they were proposing giving us something in writing which legal could look at or modify to just slip in there, giving them instructions on how to register to vote online. So I wanted to put that out there to you because I think that it is part of the civics lesson for everybody. We talk about getting the kids registered. Of course, there's nothing partisan that's going to be a part of it. It's just getting our graduates to become involved in our democracy and voting. So with part A is, are you interested in doing that? Part B is, should we let them work on something that tells them how to do it online, or do we want to do that? Because kids really don't fill out those forms and mail them. That's my generation and your generation, but it's completely up to you. And I put that out there.
Mr. Shaw?
I think Mrs. Brill's idea is excellent. I think that it is a good idea for us to work with the supervisor to do this. And I know Dr. Fenoy has shared some of his thoughts about how we're going to communicate during this graduation process with the seniors for picking up their caps, their gowns, their tassels, all of the different things, as well as the diplomas. And maybe it can be coordinated through that. So I think that the idea is excellent.
Thank you. Mrs. Whitfield, did I see your hand? I know Mrs. Brill has got her hand up, but
I was just saying, yes, I agree with her. I think that's a wonderful idea. Anything we can do to get our students to register to vote, I think we should do it. So I think all your thoughts are good. Even if there's a way we can participate in helping to encourage that, or some sort of a training, I think that would be awesome.
thank you. Ms. Brill?
Thank you. So I just want a point of clarification. It's not the supervisor of elections. She's going to have her hands full running the election in August and running it again in November. This is the League of Women Voters. They could get the forms if we want to include just put the form out there, or they can devise something, or we can, with a little note with instructions on how to register to vote. We could also, to Mrs. Whitfield's point, if we want to do something more, we could put a link on our website, possibly instructing students who are able to register to vote that way. But the question is, do we want to just include the form, or do we want to include something that outlines how to do it online? I think the cost, we should have no extra cost other than the collating of the diploma with whatever we put in there. I did tell the league that if they write something up that needs to be printed, my expectation was that they do the printing, and they said that they should have the budget to do that.
Hello.
Oh, y'all waiting on me? Oh, okay. Well, let me just add, Mr. Oswald is working on this, and so I will put this in his I will put this in his shop. I'm looking at a message where they've already done the September drive, and they're working on numbers of how many seniors. So I'll put this in the shop, and we'll follow back up with you guys.
Dr. Robinson, you're frozen there, but I think you have your hand up.
Okay.
Yes.
Am I frozen? So, yeah, I was going to support Mrs. Brill's idea and then add to it that can we please ask our student government representative how he thinks we best get that message to the students, and if as part of the whole graduation protocols, if emails are being sent to students for some reason, that the link to register to vote can be included in that email, and then the paper that would be handed to them is a backup. So I think we need to have multiple strategies if we really want to reach them.
Ms. McQuinn?
One thing that I ask that we be cognizant of, the principals that I have spoken to are anxious to do anything they can to help out the situation regarding our seniors and their graduation. There is concern with the very large high schools of just the staff commitment to get all of these things ready to mail. So, I promise you it is not Jupiter High. Okay, Dr. Ionetti never complains about anything, but we're talking about almost 800 students. So I'm using them as an example. You add 800 of one more thing to stuff in something, and it's a lot of man hours. So I'd like for us to, even though it's very convenient, I want us to be very careful about what we ask them to do.
Okay, so I guess with the superintendents, when he said that they're looking at what we can do, and they'll bring it back to us. Ms. Brill, you have something you want to add that?
Yes, just to the superintendent, I will provide Mr. Oswald with the contact information from the person who is acting on behalf of this, so that they can coordinate, and I'll let them know that there's interest, but they're going to have to work with the district on what the best ways are to get it done.
Yeah, I think Ms. Brill and listening to Ms. McQuinn, I think we can absolutely use our own technology. I forgot that we have an email address for every kid in the district. We'll be sending all kinds of messages to the children, especially the seniors, as much as we can over the next couple of months. So we will find a way, both through paper and our links, to get this information to the children. But I appreciate Ms. McQuinn saying, even getting the cap and gowns for us has been a 2-week trying to figure it out, especially with the large schools. So I hear everybody. We'll figure out something.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Brill, if we're okay with that, we'll move on to BD6, Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. This is an easy one. From the Council of Great City Schools, we need money from the federal government, and money is rolling right now. And I think you all have a copy of the 3 items. One, the letter that's been sent by the Council of Great City Schools to Congress asking for more money as it relates to the coronavirus. It's the relief bill, as well as a resolution and a press release. And if you look at the letter that was sent, all of the superintendents from the council signed on, including our Palm Beach County Superintendent, Dr. Fenoy. So we felt from the council that it would be a great deal of impression if the school board could send their own letter to the Congress, as well as a press release and also the resolution, Ms. Rico, from the school board of Palm Beach County. Do you all see the copies that we're talking about? And hopefully you will agree that we need to move forward. We definitely need the funding. Discussion?
Yes, I was trying to find my microphone. I'm sorry. Any discussion? Dr. Robinson's got her thumb up. Ms. Pearl's got her thumb up. Mrs. Whitfield's got 2 thumbs up, one for her and one for Nora. Ms. McQuinn, Mr. Shaw. Okay, I guess we're good. To Mrs. Rico.
Thank you. So are you wanting to bring this back for a vote, or are you wanting to vote on it right now? You want to bring it back, draft up this draft resolution, bring it back for a board item for a vote?
Yes, we need to bring it back because it's going to be our resolution, but this is a guide for you to use.
Thank you.
All right, so Mrs. Rico, we don't need a motion to bring it back at this point. You're just going to bring it back. Yes?
This Dr. Fenoy, is that a yes?
Okay, that was a silent yes from the superintendent. That'll take us to BD7, Mrs. Anders.
Thank you. I saw we had 3 people speaking today, and I knew a lot of people that really wanted to speak. And so, you know, everybody might not be able to write. So I just hope that we can come up with some technology that's going to truly help us to be able to get the community more involved in addressing the school board. And I wanted to tell you, in Boston and Chicago, they have it set up where they actually have the board meetings, and they use technology to allow the community to publicly address the school board during the meetings. I mean, so they have that technology there. But I was looking in the state of Florida, and I saw that one county, Leon County, has some communication media technology where they're having public comments, as well as Pasco County. They have a telephone piece where you can actually call in. And, you know, everybody, you know, the writing is fine, but the more we get closer to the community, for them to be able to say what they need to say is critical. So I wanted us to discuss how we can get there faster so that by the next time we have a full board meeting, we have another process in place where people can feel a lot more closer to us, i.e. by being on remote or by being on the telephone, but they will have better access than just writing, because everybody's not able to write it.
Mrs. Whitfield.
I just wanted to say I totally agree. This is something I've felt really strongly about since the beginning. I was hoping that there would be even, you know, I kind of imagined if you're on like a Facebook Live, they will have the opportunity where people can put comments. We don't need to make it that live stream, but just so people can submit their questions ahead of time, that we can see them. Or be there for commentary. I really think we need to be more accessible. So I totally agree with you, Ms. Sanders.
All right, so I feel the same way. I mean, just tonight to have to, Mr. Gavrilos, after he did so much, and of course the teachers having jumped through hoops for us, and to have to not let either Mr. Gavrilos or Mr. Katz, or for that matter, the Economic Council, to speak to us after they've all supported us through all this, was kind of disappointing. So if you all, I saw thumbs go up. So if everybody agrees, I'll ask Mr. Tierney's to the communications office to figure out a way where we can have the 3-minute call-ins. I guess people can call in, and we can, I guess one of the concerns was that people would be out of control and they start doing things. But in a boardroom, we'd call one of the security officers over to throw them out, but it'd be easy for us just to turn off the microphone if they start getting out of control. And we can certainly time them. We can figure out how to put a timer up on the screen so they can see the timer. So if you all agree, and Mr. Superintendent, I don't think you and I briefly discussed it, but if there's no issues, we'll work on getting that done for the next regular meeting at the end of May. Everybody okay? Thumbs up?
Yeah, I have Mr. T. We've already started looking at it. A lot of it is just the safety protocols. With the reason why you don't see many districts across the country doing it is, it's just interesting times, and so we got to make sure we protect the board and the public from some of the things that we've been witnessing on other calls. But we're working on it, and our IT team has been fantastic. So we'll figure it out.
All right, great. Okay, that'll take care of that one. And did we get to Dr. Robinson's additional one? Dr. Robinson? I don't
Thank
think
you.
any of mine did.
Okay, so this is my request that we consider having an umbrella policy for the Discipline Review Committee. So as I mentioned, the Discipline Review Committee is embedded within our policies on zero tolerance and severe incident assignment. But there's other students who go through the Discipline Review Committee, apparently, the behavior assignments and felony suspension. So I think that we need to have an umbrella policy that says what students on what path, I don't know how else to say this, would go through discipline review committee. How do you get on discipline review? How do you get off? What training is necessary to be on discipline review committee? Because we have expanded it from being principals to adding other folks to that committee, which I think is very good. And then the other part that I wanted to add is that we have reports to the board every semester. I don't think that it needs to be on the board agenda, but reports to the board every semester that shows who is going to alternative ed by whichever pathway. I believe all those pathways go through discipline review committee except for the packets, but we need to see who's going, because now some offenses, instead of being expulsions, will now be severe incidences. And so I don't want this to be a loophole and we no longer see, what's going on. So I would like to have semester reports to the board that include the usual disaggregated information on race, gender, age, ELL, ESC status, the school, the offense, and what, if it went through the discipline review committee, if they requested a hearing, if it was zero tolerance, severe incident, safety placement, etc., so that we can just have a graphic that shows us what's happening. Because if you will recall, it's a result of some of the conversations that took place in these expulsion hearings that told us that we needed to change how we operated, and that for students who had behavior problems, it informed us. And so I want this data to help inform us. So this is a two-pronged request, one for the policy that will be an umbrella policy for the discipline review committee, and secondly, to request those semester reports to the board in a graphic way showing us who's been staffed by whatever mechanism to alternative ed.
Discussion? Other discussion? I agree with Dr. Robinson. Mr. Superintendent, if we can get those reports, and if we need to take a motion tonight to do that, I can see a thumbs up from Mrs. Rico. I don't know. I was trying to read three different things while you were speaking, Dr. Robinson, and I don't even. One of my concerns is when we get those reports, I want to know what race the child is. If they're African American, if they're Hispanic, I want to know that. For the, when we have those ones where we sit in the room, we can see them, but we're not going to get to see them. So unless there's something that we can't put in a report like that, Mrs. Rico, if that could be part of this, I would want to see that in there too.
We would just simply have to ensure that it was done in a way that maintained the confidentiality of that student information if it was reported in a way that was personally identifiable. But we've made reports about student information before and kept it confidential. So I'm sure we can work on a method that would satisfy those issues.
Okay, so we need to bring this back for next week, or can we take a motion on it this evening, Mrs. Rico?
I think as to the report, making a motion that you want the district to, create such a report, since it's, work. That would be one, and then making a motion to bring back to go ahead and develop the policy for the umbrella committee. Both of those should have a vote.
Okay, Dr. Robinson, you want to make the motion?
Yes, so we'll start with the motion to direct staff to create a policy, umbrella policy for the discipline review committee with details as described.
Is there a second on that? By Mrs. Andrews. Any further discussion? All in favor? All opposed? Motion 7-0. Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. And the second is to direct staff to prepare and present every semester to the board reports that show the students that have been placed in alternative ed by whichever pathway. And these reports would include the school, their offense, race, gender, age, ELL, ESC status, as well as whether or not they had a hearing, and the method of placement to alternative ed.
Ms. McQuinn, are you seconding that motion?
Seconding for purpose of discussion.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead with the discussion.
Okay, I got it. This is just a protocol question. Are we directing the superintendent? We're not directing staff, right? We're directing the superintendent?
Yeah, Dr. Robinson, you said directing staff, but you meant the superintendent, I assume, because we can't direct staff.
Oh, okay. So in my mind, superintendent is staff, but okay. He's high-ranking staff.
The highest. Okay, Ms.
So yes, it's the superintendent.
Okay, Ms. McQuinn, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries 7-0.
Your mic is off.
Thank you. Maybe I'll get used to it by sometime next month. But so we have two non-agenda speakers. One of them wrote a lot. The board clerk asked.
The meeting has been automatically extended.
Who said that? Voice of God. Anyway, one of them wrote more than they probably should have. It's longer, but he didn't respond back to the board clerk when she asked him to summarize it or shorten it. So at this point, we're just going to read them both. So Ms. Brill, would you announce their name Mrs. Bass, would you announce their name and then read the two non-agenda speaker comments?
Yes. Okay. First comment is by Lisa Eisenberg. Hello, and I hope everyone is doing as well as possible and staying safe. While we are all grieving losses of different kinds during this difficult time, the high school seniors in Palm Beach County are grieving the loss of their senior year. Prom, graduation, senior nights, grad bash, and the last moments with their teachers and friends have all been taken from them. It is wonderful that the district has decided to hold a virtual graduation and consider rescheduling some events when it is deemed safe. However, these students have worked too hard to graduate with such little fanfare. Principals around the world are honoring their students in creative and personal ways, and some principals in Palm Beach County are doing the same. As leaders of our school principals, I implore you to encourage and guide every high school in Palm Beach County to step up and honor their seniors in the same way. Why should graduating seniors of one school get a letter or sign delivered to their door by their principal when others do not? If we are all, in fact, all in this together, then we should unify our district and honor the graduates more publicly than flashing a picture on a screen and calling their name on a district website. Every Palm Beach County high school should have administrators personally delivering signs to their seniors along with diplomas and awards by their principals. Every Palm Beach County high school should be displaying the names of graduates proudly on banners outside the schools and on the school marquee. Additionally, the high school campuses should be policed and open for one day in a drive-through capacity so that families can take photos and experience the public displays that the schools should be putting on for our 2020 seniors. While you don't have the ability to control the pandemic, you do have the ability to give these kids back some of the memories they have lost, recognize them more personally and publicly, and do right by our class of 2020. They all deserve it. That is from Lisa Eisenberg. The next comment is from Brother Carl Mohammed. Peace and blessing team players of the Palm Beach County School District. Well, today we wanted to give you an update, a reminder, if you will, that the school district of Palm Beach County's mission statement says the district is committed to excellence in education and preparation of all students with the knowledge, skill, and efforts required for responsible citizenship and productive employment. And we wanted to remind you that the Palm Beach County School District goals are to increase literacy, student performance, school safety and environment, develop a challenging curriculum, staff development, financial responsibility, and the greatest of them all, parent and community involvement along with productive citizenship. Now we know that the school district of Palm Beach County results are supposed to be increased literacy, Algebra 1, proficiency in reading, writing, and math, school grade criteria, upper level math and science courses, the SAT, advanced program, and dropout and graduation rates, suspension, and most importantly, resources. As we continue to try to bring about a relationship between the community and the school district, we have partnered with the school district of Palm Beach County to assist with repairing the damage that has been done to our children, a result of the miseducation of all, with a connection on African American children. Florida Statute 1003.42 parens 2 parens H identifies the problem and the need in the state of Florida for African American children. The need hasn't been fulfilled and is the sole purpose of our Third Eye bookstore. The message is to recognize the reality and fulfill the need. Please see Florida Statute 1003.42 parens 2 parens H, which states, members of the instructional staff of the public schools, subject to rules of the State Board of Education and the District School Board, shall teach efficiently and faithfully, using the books and materials required that meet the highest standards for professionalism and historic accuracy, following the prescribed courses of study, and employing improved methods of instruction, the following: the history of African Americans, including the history of African people before the political conflict that led to the development of slavery, the passage to America, enslavement, experienced abolition, and the contributions of African Americans to society. Instructional material shall include the contributions of Africans to the society of the 67 counties in the state of Florida. Palm Beach County is leading in its efforts because of community involvement. As a valuable part of the community, we are writing to ask you for your support with a tax-deductible donation made payable to Fathers Forever Incorporated. Your donation will help with providing services that will increase the academic enrichment of its participants, educational professionals, and the general community, promote higher education, community service, cultural wellness, sexual responsibilities, health, and making positive life choices to ensure positive future for self and the community, as well as meeting the district goals. We want to look at the people that we've already educated so far who are not in a position to help us. Not the county administrator, not a congressman, not a Senate representative, not a senator, not a council person, not a mayor, not even a strong mayor like the city of West Palm Beach, not a church or a fraternity order. We are requesting and trying to get in touch with the spirit of those who want, to those of you who oversee the stewardship of our children's life, and to ask you to help us once again. Peace and blessing, and please be safe. Thank you, Brother Carl Mohammed.
Thank you, Mrs. Bass. If there are no other items any of the board members want to discuss, Mr. Superintendent, if you have nothing else, we can adjourn the meeting with a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing else.
Motion by Mrs. Andrews, seconded by Dr. Robinson. I assume there's no discussion. All in favor of adjourning? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Good night, everybody. Have a nice evening.